The waitress stopped for a crying child when she should have kept running to work. That one choice got her fired, broke, and desperate. But the little boy she comforted wasn't just any child. He was a mafia boss's son. And now she's the only person he trusts. The salt air hit Lena's face as she sprinted down the cobblestone path toward the harbor. She was already 20 minutes late, and Marco, her boss at the Harborview Cafe, had made it crystal clear last week that one more tardy arrival would be her last. The bus had broken down 3 blocks away, leaving her no choice but to run the rest of the distance in her worn sneakers, her apron clutched in one hand and her phone in the other. "Please, please, please," she muttered, dodging a group of tourists snapping photos of the fishing boats. The morning sun glinted off the water, turning the harbor into a postcard scene that she had no time to appreciate. Her shift started at 7, and it was already 7:20. Then she heard it. A sound that cut through the morning bustle like a knife. A child's sob, raw and desperate. Lena slowed, her head turning toward the noise. There, near the edge of the harbor where the safety railing met the concrete walkway, sat a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old, curled into himself with his knees pulled to his chest. His dark hair was messy, his face streaked with tears, and his small body shook with each gasping breath. Lena's heart lurched. She glanced at her phone, 7:22, then back at the child. The cafe was just 2 more blocks away. She could see its blue awning from here. The boy let out another wail, and the decision made itself. "Damn it," she whispered, shoving her phone into her pocket and jogging toward him. As she got closer, she noticed he was wearing expensive clothes, a navy polo shirt with a small embroidered logo she didn't recognize, and pristine white sneakers that probably cost more than her rent. His face was buried in his hands, and he didn't seem to notice her approach. "Hey, sweetheart," Lena said softly, crouching down a few feet away so she wouldn't startle him. "Are you okay? Where's your mom or dad?" The boy's head snapped up, revealing large brown eyes swimming with fear. He stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving, but said nothing. "It's okay," Lena continued, keeping her voice gentle. "My name is Lena. I'm not going to hurt you. Can you tell me your name?" The child's lower lip trembled. He shook his head violently and pressed himself harder against the railing, as if trying to disappear into the metal bars. Lena's mind raced. He was clearly terrified and alone, but something about his silence felt wrong. Most lost kids cried for their parents or asked for help. This boy looked like he was afraid to speak at all. "Okay, you don't have to tell me anything," she said, sitting down cross-legged on the cold concrete to make herself less threatening. "But I can't leave you here alone. It's not safe by the water. How about we sit together for a minute, and then we'll figure out how to find your family?" The boy watched her with those wide, haunted eyes. After what felt like an eternity, he gave the tiniest nod. Lena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw Marco's name flashing across the screen. Her stomach dropped. She sent the call to voicemail and immediately fired off a text. "Emergency. We'll explain. Be there ASAP." His response came within seconds. "Don't bother. We're done, Lena. Seriously done." She stared at the message, feeling the familiar weight of dread settle in her chest. That was it, then. 4 months of work, gone. The rent was due in 8 days, and she had exactly $243 in her checking account. But when she looked back at the little boy, still trembling and alone, she couldn't bring herself to care about Marco, or the cafe, or anything else. This child needed help. Nothing was more important than that. "All right, let's get you somewhere safe," she said, standing up slowly. "There's a police station just a few blocks from here. They'll help us find your parents." At the mention of police, the boy's eyes went wide with fresh panic. He scrambled to his feet and grabbed Lena's hand with surprising strength, shaking his head so hard his hair fell across his forehead. "No police?" Lena asked, confused. "Why not? They're the good guys, honey. They help lost kids." The boy squeezed her hand tighter, his small fingers digging into her palm. A single tear rolled down his cheek, and he pressed himself against her side, as if she were the only solid thing in a tilting world. Lena felt something cold snake down her spine. This wasn't just a lost child. Something was very wrong. She knelt down again, meeting his eyes directly. "Did someone hurt you? Are you afraid of someone?" The boy didn't answer, but he didn't let go of her hand either. Instead, he buried his face against her shoulder, his small body shaking with silent sobs. Lena wrapped her free arm around him, her mind spinning through possibilities. Kidnapping? Abuse? A custody situation gone wrong? Whatever it was, she was in over her head. She needed help, but if the police scared him this much, maybe. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Marco. "Security footage shows you ran right past. You saw the cafe and kept going. That's it. You're fired. Don't come back." Lena closed her eyes and pulled the crying child closer. She'd just lost her job, her income, and possibly her apartment. But as she felt the little boy's desperate grip on her shirt, she knew she'd made the right choice. She just had no idea that this single decision would pull her into a world where kindness was currency, loyalty was survival, and the crying child in her arms was the most valuable person in the city's criminal underworld. The boy finally pulled back and looked up at her with those impossibly sad eyes. He still wouldn't speak, but he held up 5 fingers, his age, she guessed, and then pointed at her heart. "You want me to stay with you?" Lena asked. He nodded, another tear sliding down his cheek. "Okay," she whispered, standing up with him still clutching her hand. "Okay, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Lena's legs ached as she walked the boy toward the Harbor Patrol office, a small brick building tucked between 2 seafood restaurants. She tried everything, asking passers-by if they recognized him, checking for any identification in his pockets, even walking him past the nearby hotels hoping he'd point one out. Nothing worked. The child remained silent, his grip on her hand never loosening. When they finally reached the patrol office, the boy's resistance intensified. He pulled back, his sneakers scraping against the pavement, his free hand reaching for Lena's shirt. "It's okay," she soothed, crouching down once more. "These people will help find your family. I promise I'll stay with you until they come, all right?" The boy's eyes filled with fresh tears, but he didn't fight as she gently guided him inside. The officer at the desk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a tight bun, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" "I found him by the harbor," Lena explained, her voice strained from exhaustion. "About 40 minutes ago. He won't speak, and he seems terrified. I don't know his name or where he came from." The officer's expression shifted from routine boredom to sharp attention. She came around the desk quickly, kneeling to the boy's level. "Hey there, buddy. Can you tell me your name?" The boy pressed himself against Lena's leg, silent. "Any identification?" the officer asked Lena. "Nothing. His clothes look expensive, but there are no tags, no phone, no wallet. Just him." The officer nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the boy with professional concern. "We've had a report this morning. High-profile family, missing child. Dark hair, about 5 years old. Expensive clothing." She reached for her radio. "Let me confirm." Lena felt the boy's hand tighten around hers, his pulse racing against her palm. High-profile family. That explained the expensive clothes, maybe even the fear. "I need to get to work," Lena said, though the words felt hollow now. "But I promised I'd stay with him until—" "You can go," the officer said, her tone professional but not unkind. "We'll take it from here. You did a good thing bringing him in." Lena looked down at the boy, who was now staring up at her with an expression that broke her heart. His eyes were pleading, desperate, as if she were abandoning him to wolves. "I'll stay a little longer," Lena heard herself say, even though every minute meant more trouble with Marco, if there was anything left to salvage. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, and her stomach plummeted. Marco's final message was short and brutal. "Your last paycheck will be mailed. Don't use me as a reference." Lena stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly. For months of split shifts, rude customers, and burning her hands on hot plates, all gone. The cafe had been her third job in 6 months, and she'd barely managed to keep her studio apartment through the lean weeks. Now, with rent due and no income, she was staring down eviction. "Ma'am," the officer said, "we've got confirmation. The family is sending someone to pick him up. Should be here within the hour. You're free to go." The boy suddenly lunged forward, wrapping both arms around Lena's waist. His small body trembled, and though he still didn't make a sound, she could feel the silent plea in every fiber of his being. "Don't leave me." "Hey, it's okay," Lena whispered, stroking his hair. "Your family's coming. They're probably so worried about you. They'll be so happy to see you." The boy shook his head against her stomach, his grip tightening. The officer's radio crackled. "Unit 7, we have a situation at Harborview Cafe. Reported disturbance with a terminated employee." Lena's blood ran cold. Marco wouldn't, would he? "Ma'am, I really need you to step aside now," the officer said, her tone firmer. "We'll take good care of him." Reluctantly, Lena tried to pry the boy's hands away, but he clung harder, his small fingers bunching the fabric of her shirt. Tears streamed down his face, though he remained eerily quiet, as if he'd learned long ago that crying out loud brought danger instead of comfort. "Sweetheart, I have to go," Lena said, her own voice cracking. "But your mom or dad will be here soon. I promise you'll be safe." The officer gently but firmly separated them. The boy reached for Lena, his mouth opening as if to finally speak, but no words came out. Instead, his face crumpled in silent anguish as the officer led him toward a back room designated for processing found children. Lena watched him go, her heart splintering. The last thing she saw before the door closed was his small hand stretched toward her, fingers grasping at empty air. She stood there for a moment, feeling untethered. Then her phone buzzed again, a notification from her bank. Her account balance was now in the red after an automatic payment she'd forgotten about. Lena walked out of the patrol office into the late morning sun, squinting against the brightness. The harbor was bustling with tourists and vendors, everyone going about their normal day. She had no job, no prospects, and no idea how she'd survive the next week. But as she trudged toward the bus stop, she couldn't shake the image of those desperate brown eyes, or the feeling that she'd just walked away from something far more important than a paycheck. She had no way of knowing that in less than 12 hours, her entire world would turn upside down. Lena's apartment was exactly as depressing as she'd left it that morning, a cramped studio with peeling wallpaper, a kitchenette that barely fit a hot plate, and a mattress on the floor that served as her bed. She collapsed onto it, still wearing her clothes, staring at the water-stained ceiling as the afternoon light faded through her single window. Her phone lay beside her, silent now after hours of frantic job searching. She'd sent out 17 applications, called every contact she had in the service industry, and even swallowed her pride to ask her ex-roommate if she knew of any openings. Nothing. The brutal truth was that in a tourist town like this, fired waitresses were a dime a dozen. Rent was due in 7 days. She had negative $12 in her account. Lena closed her eyes, trying to push away the anxiety clawing at her chest. Instead, she saw the little boy's face, those haunted brown eyes, the silent tears, the desperate reach of his small hand. She wondered if his family had picked him up, if he was home safe now, if he'd finally spoken. The thought gave her a small measure of comfort. At least she'd done one thing right today. As darkness settled over the city, Lena forced herself up to make instant ramen, her third meal of the day from the same package. She was halfway through the flavorless noodles when the pounding started. Bang! 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 The sound exploded through her door like thunder, violent and demanding. Lena nearly dropped her bowl, her heart jumping into her throat. "Open up," a deep male voice commanded. "We know you're in there." Lena's mind raced. Debt collectors? No, they couldn't come to your home like this. The landlord? Not his style. Marco, angry about, no, he wouldn't care enough to track her down. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice shaking. "Open the door, Miss Hayes."
Now.
The use of her last name sent ice through her veins. She crept toward the window and pulled back the thin curtain just enough to peek outside. Her breath caught. 2 black SUVs were parked directly in front of her building, their engines still running. Men in dark suits stood beside them, their posture rigid and alert. Even from the 4th floor, she could see the bulges under their jackets that suggested weapons. "Oh God," Lena whispered. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." The pounding came again, harder this time. "Miss Hayes, we're not here to hurt you. We need to speak with you about the boy you found this morning. Please open the door."
The boy.
This was about the boy. High-profile family, the officer had said. Lena's mind spun with terrible possibilities. Had something happened? Was she being blamed for something? Had she somehow violated some protocol by staying with him? With trembling hands, she unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door open, keeping the chain in place. 2 massive men in expensive suits stood in the narrow hallway, their expressions unreadable. The closer one had a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. "Miss Lena Hayes?" Scarface asked, his tone surprisingly professional.
Yjes.
"What is this about?" "I took him to the authorities. I did everything right. We know. That's why we're here." He glanced at his partner, then back at Lena. "Mr. DeLuca would like to speak with you. We have a car waiting." "DeLuca?" The name meant nothing to her. "Look, I don't know who that is, but I'm not going anywhere with." A small figure suddenly pushed between the 2 men, his dark hair messy and his brown eyes lighting up with recognition. It was the boy.
You.
Lena gasped, unlatching the chain and pulling the door open wider. "You're okay. Did you find your family?" The boy nodded enthusiastically, a genuine smile breaking across his face for the first time. He rushed forward and wrapped his arms around Lena's waist, hugging her tightly. "He hasn't stopped asking about you," Scarface said, his expression softening slightly. "Hasn't stopped asking for you, actually. First words he's spoken in 2 days were your name." "Well, Lena, but close enough." Lena looked down at the boy, stunned. "You can talk." The boy nodded against her stomach, then pulled back to look up at her. "You stayed," he said quietly, his voice small but clear. "You stayed with me when you didn't have to." Tears pricked Lena's eyes. "Of course I did, sweetheart. His father wants to thank you personally," the other man said. "We're not asking, Miss Hayes, but Mr. DeLuca is not a patient man, and Nico here insisted we bring you tonight." Nico. Finally, she knew his name. This is all very sudden," Lena said, her mind still reeling. "Can't he just call me? Or—" "The car is more appropriate for this conversation," Scarface interrupted. "Trust me." Something in his tone made Lena's survival instincts flare. These weren't normal concerned parents. The suits, the SUVs, the armed men, the way they spoke, this was something else entirely. "What if I say no?" she asked carefully. The 2 men exchanged glances. Nico squeezed her hand. "Then we politely insist," Scarface said. "But for what it's worth, you're not in trouble. Mr. DeLuca genuinely wants to thank you. You saved his son's life today, Miss Hayes. That means something." Lena looked down at Nico, who gazed back at her with those trusting eyes. Against every rational thought screaming in her head, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she whispered. "Let me grab my jacket." As she followed them down the stairs, Nico's small hand secure in hers, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking towards something irreversible. The black SUV's door opened like a mouth, and she stepped inside. The SUV glided through the city streets in silence, tinted windows blocking out the world. Lena sat in the back seat with Nico pressed against her side, while the 2 suited men occupied the front. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of a radio transmission in Italian. Italian. That registered somewhere in Lena's anxious mind. DeLuca. Italian surname. The expensive clothes, the armed guards, the black SUVs. Pieces of a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. After 20 minutes, They left the city behind, climbing a winding coastal road that hugged the cliffs. The ocean stretched out endlessly to the right, moonlight dancing on dark waves. To the left, dense forest gave way occasionally to glimpses of massive estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. The SUV finally turned onto a private road marked only by a small, tasteful sign. Private property. No trespassing. They passed through a gate that opened automatically, its wrought iron posts topped with security cameras that tracked their progress. Lena's mouth went dry. The mansion that emerged from the darkness looked like something from a movie, 3 stories of pale stone and arched windows, lit by strategic spotlights that made it glow against the night sky. A circular driveway surrounded a fountain, and manicured gardens stretched out on either side. More men in suits stood at strategic positions, watching as the SUV pulled up to the main entrance. "Welcome to Casa de Luca," Scarface said, opening Lena's door. Nico hopped out excitedly and tugged on her hand. "Come on. Papa's waiting."
Papa. Father.
This was Nico's home. Lena stepped out on shaking legs, her worn sneakers and clearance rack jeans suddenly feeling like a costume at a black tie event. A woman in an elegant black dress appeared at the entrance, speaking rapid Italian to one of the guards before her eyes landed on Nico. "Nico," she cried, rushing down the steps.
Grazie a Dio.
But Nico ducked behind Lena, peeking out shyly. The woman stopped, confusion and hurt flashing across her face. "He's been like this since the incident," Scarface murmured to Lena. "Won't let anyone touch him except immediate family. And now you, apparently." The woman, a housekeeper or perhaps a nanny, composed herself and gestured toward the entrance. "Mr. DeLuca is in his study. Please follow me." The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that looked museum quality. Lena tried not to gawk as they walked through a grand foyer and down a hallway lined with what she assumed were family portraits. They stopped at a pair of heavy wooden doors. The woman knocked twice, then opened them. "Sir, they're here." "Send them in." The voice was deep, controlled, and carried an authority that made Lena's spine straighten involuntarily. The study was massive, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace large enough to stand in, and a desk made of dark wood that looked like it weighed more than Lena's entire apartment. Behind that desk sat a man who immediately commanded every bit of attention in the room. Matteo DeLuca was probably in his late 30s, with dark hair graying slightly at the temples, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that seemed to assess and catalog everything in an instant. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with what looked like old scars. A glass of amber liquid sat at his elbow, untouched. When he saw Nico, his entire demeanor shifted. The intensity softened into something that looked almost like relief. "Nico," he said, standing. "Come here, son." But Nico remained half-hidden behind Lena, his small hand gripping her shirt. Matteo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He walked around the desk with measured steps, then crouched down to Nico's level a few feet away. "It's all right. You're safe now. You're home." Nico nodded, but didn't move toward his father. Something painful flickered across Matteo's face before he masked it and stood, turning his full attention to Lena. She felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing, assessing, calculating, deciding. "Miss Hayes," he said.
Lena.
"May I call you Lena?" "Sure," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "My men tell me you found Nico at the harbor this morning, that you stayed with him even after it made you late for work, that you lost your job because of it." He paused. "Is this accurate?"
Yes.
"But I didn't do it expecting anything." He was scared and alone. Anyone would have. "No," Matteo interrupted, his tone firm. "Not anyone. Most people would have called the police and left. You stayed. You held his hand. You tried to comfort him when he was terrified." He glanced at Nico. "My son hasn't spoken in 2 days. Not until he asked for you."
Lena didn't know what to say to that.
Mateo walked to a side table and poured himself a fresh drink. Do you know who I am, Lena? Mr. DeLuca, she said carefully. Nico's father. A slight smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. A diplomatic answer. Let me be direct then. My family has business interests throughout this city, legitimate and otherwise. We have enemies who would love nothing more than to hurt me through my son. He took a sip of his drink. 3 days ago, someone lured Nico away from his bodyguards during a family event. We've been searching for him ever since. The fact that you found him before our enemies did likely saved his life. The room seemed to tilt slightly.
Mafia.
The word hung unspoken in the air, but it was there in every detail. The armed guards, the fortress-like mansion, the careful way Mateo chose his words. I see, Lena whispered. I doubt that, Mateo said, not unkindly. But you will, he set down his glass. I owe you a debt, Lena Hayes. Name your price. Lena stared at Mateo, her mind struggling to process what he was asking. My price? I don't
want anything.
I just helped a scared kid. That's what anyone with a conscience would do. Mateo's expression shifted, something between respect and disbelief. You lost your job. Your income. I imagine your financial situation is precarious at best. Heat crept up Lena's neck. It was humiliating having a stranger, especially one this powerful, dissect her life so accurately. I'll find another job, she said, lifting her chin. I don't need your money. Pride is admirable, Mateo said, leaning against his desk. But impractical. Let me be clear, I'm offering compensation, not charity. You performed a service that my own security team failed to accomplish. You deserve payment. I didn't do it for payment. I know. That's precisely why you'll receive it. Nico tugged on Lena's hand, looking up at her with worried eyes, as if he could sense the tension building. Lena softened her tone. Mr. DeLuca, I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept money for doing the right thing. It would feel
wrong.
Can we just leave it at you're welcome and I'll be on my way? She moved toward the door, gently pulling Nico with her. Come on, sweetheart. Your dad wants to spend time with you. Nico's reaction was immediate and visceral. He released a cry that cut through the room like a siren, the first loud sound Lena had heard him make. His small hands clutched her leg desperately, and he shook his head with wild panic, tears already streaming down his face.
No, eso Beth.
Don't go. Please don't leave me. Please. Lena froze, her heart breaking at the raw terror in his voice. She dropped to her knees and wrapped him in her arms. Hey, it's okay. I'm right here. You'll leave like everyone leaves. Nico cried into her shoulder. They always leave. They always go away. Over Nico's head, Lena saw Mateo's face, a mask of controlled emotion that couldn't quite hide the pain underneath. This was a man watching his son seek comfort from a stranger instead of him. Nico, Mateo said quietly, taking a step forward. Son, I'm here. I won't leave you. But Nico only buried his face deeper against Lena's shoulder, his small body racked with sobs. Mateo ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. He's been like this since we found him. The psychologist says it's trauma-induced attachment disorder. He won't sleep unless someone sits outside his door.
He barely eats.
And he refuses to be alone with anyone except... He gestured helplessly at Lena. Lena stroked Nico's hair, feeling his tears soak through her shirt. What happened to him? Where was he for 2 days? We don't know, Mateo admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice was startling.
He won't talk about it.
The medical exam showed no physical injuries, but whatever he experienced, he stopped, jaw clenching. Someone inside my organization set this up. Someone he trusted lured him away and handed him to people who wanted to use him against me. We found him locked in a storage container at the old shipping yard, alone in the dark. Lena's arms tightened around Nico instinctively. A 5-year-old, trapped alone in the dark for 2 days. The thought made her sick. The police said a high-profile family, she began. I have arrangements with local authorities. Mateo cut her off. They contact me first in situations involving my family. It's safer that way, he paused. Safer for everyone. The implication was clear. This world operated by different rules. Nico's sobs had quieted to hiccuping breaths. He pulled back to look at Lena with red-rimmed eyes. You won't go? Lena glanced at Mateo helplessly. Sweetheart, I have to go home eventually. But your papa is here, and he loves you very much. Please, Nico whispered, and the single word carried such desperate hope that it physically hurt.
Please stay.
Just tonight. Just until I sleep. Lena looked at Mateo again, seeking guidance. The mafia boss stood utterly still, and she realized he was waiting for her decision. This powerful man who commanded respect and fear throughout the city was giving her the choice. One night, she heard herself say, "Just until you fall asleep, okay?" Nico nodded frantically, relief flooding his features. Mateo exhaled slowly. Marco will show you to the guest wing. Nico's room is adjacent. The connecting door can remain open. He turned to the window, his back rigid. Thank you. 2 hours later, Lena sat in a guest bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in soft creams and golds. Through the open connecting door, she could see Nico's room, a child's paradise of toys, books, and a bed shaped like a race car. Nico himself had finally fallen asleep after she'd read him 3 stories, his small hand still reaching toward the doorway as if to make sure she hadn't vanished. A soft knock made her turn. Mateo stood in her doorway, still wearing the same white shirt, though he looked more exhausted now. He's asleep, Lena whispered. I know. I was watching. Mateo stepped inside, but kept his distance. I need to propose something, and I need you to hear me out before you refuse. Lena's stomach tightened. Okay. My son trusts you. In his current state, that trust is invaluable. The psychologist says forcing separation could traumatize him further. Mateo met her eyes directly. I'm asking you to stay. Not just tonight. Stay as Nico's caretaker until he stabilizes. I'll pay you triple what you made at the cafe, cover all expenses, and provide full security. You want me to live here? Lena asked, incredulous. Temporarily. A few weeks, perhaps a month. Just until Nico feels safe again. I can't just. Your rent is due in 7 days. You have no job and no prospects. His tone wasn't cruel, just factual. I'm offering you stability in exchange for helping my son heal. It's business. But looking at his face, Lena knew it was anything but business. This was a father desperate to save his child. Lena barely slept that night. The guest bed was more comfortable than anything she'd ever experienced, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nico's desperate face, heard Mateo's controlled desperation, felt the weight of a decision that seemed to grow heavier by the hour. A mafia boss. She was considering working for a mafia boss. When dawn light filtered through the silk curtains, she found Nico standing in the connecting doorway, clutching a stuffed rabbit. His hair stuck up in different directions, and his eyes were puffy from yesterday's tears. You stayed, he whispered, as if he couldn't quite believe it. I said I would, Lena replied, sitting up. Come here. Nico rushed over and climbed onto the bed, curling up next to her. Will you stay today too? The question pierced her heart. I need to talk to your papa about that. He'll give you anything, Nico said matter-of-factly. Papa always gets what he wants. There was something sad in how casually he said it, as if he'd already learned that power and money solved everything, except the things that actually mattered. An hour later, showered and wearing the same clothes from yesterday, Lena found Mateo in a dining room that could seat 20 people. He sat alone at one end of a massive table, reading something on a tablet while drinking espresso. He'd changed into a navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Good morning, he said, standing. Please sit. Breakfast. Just coffee. Thanks. Lena took a seat, feeling acutely aware of her wrinkled shirt and bargain jeans. A woman appeared immediately with coffee and pastries that smelled like they'd been baked minutes ago. Mateo waited until she left before speaking. Have you considered my offer? Lena wrapped her hands around a coffee cup, buying time. I have questions. Of course. What exactly would my job be? Spend time with Nico. Help him feel safe. The psychologist will continue her sessions, but she says the most important thing right now is stability and trust. You provide that. Mateo set down his cup. You'd live here, in the guest wing. Full room and board. A driver would take you anywhere you need to go. A driver or a guard? His lips twitched. Both. For your safety as much as ours. Anyone who knows you're helping my son could try to use you as leverage. The reality of that sank in like ice water. I'd be a target. You already are, Mateo said bluntly. The moment you brought Nico to the harbor patrol, you entered this world. The only question is whether you'll be an unprotected civilian or someone under my family's protection. Lena's hands trembled slightly. That's not fair. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's the truth. He leaned forward. Lena, I need to be completely honest with you. The threat to my son is ongoing. We haven't identified who orchestrated his kidnapping. Until we do, everyone close to him is at risk. If you walk away now, I'll have someone watch your apartment, make sure you're safe. But if you stay, you'll have the full weight of my organization protecting you. Why me? Lena asked, frustration bleeding into her voice. You must have people, nannies, caretakers, professionals who know how to deal with traumatized children. We tried. He screamed himself hoarse when the child psychologist attempted to separate him from thoughts of you. He asked for you 18 times yesterday. Mateo's expression hardened. My son is the most important person in my world, Miss Hayes. If he needs you, then I need you. It's that simple. Lena thought about her apartment, her overdue bills, her complete lack of prospects. Then she thought about Nico's small hand in hers, the trust in his eyes, the way he'd finally smiled for the first time at the harbor. What about my life? She asked quietly. My friends, my independence, You'll have access to everything you need. Phone, internet, the ability to leave the estate with security. This isn't prison, Lena. It's protective custody. He paused. And frankly, from what my people found, you don't have much tying you down. No family in the city, no significant other, few close friends. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm pointing out that this arrangement disrupts less than you think. It stung because it was true. Her life had been a series of survival moves, cheap apartments, temporary jobs, surface-level friendships that faded when she couldn't afford to go out. She'd been so focused on getting by that she'd never actually built anything lasting. I need to job hunt, she said weakly. I can't just put my life on hold. I'll pay $6,000 a month, plus room and board, plus a $5,000 signing bonus. Mateo's tone was businesslike. That's triple your cafe wages plus compensation for the job you lost. When Nico no longer needs you, I'll provide excellent references and 6-month severance. Lena's mind spun. $6,000 a month? She'd been making barely $2,000 at the cafe. In 1 month here, she could pay off her debts, save money, actually have a cushion for the first time in years. How long are we talking? She asked. The psychologist estimates 4 to 6 weeks. Possibly less if he responds well to treatment. 6 weeks. She could handle 6 weeks of anything, couldn't she? And if I say no? Mateo stood, walking to the window, overlooking the grounds. Then I respect your decision. I'll have your apartment paid through the end of the year and arrange security from a distance. No strings attached. You helped my son, and I don't forget debts. He turned back. But he needs you, Lena. And I think maybe you need this too. Lena opened her mouth to argue, but movement in the doorway caught her eye. Nico stood there in pajamas, his stuffed rabbit dragging on the floor, looking between them with barely contained hope. Lena, he said softly, are you staying? She looked at his face, at Mateo's carefully controlled expression, at the opulent room that represented a world so far from her own it might as well be another planet. Then she thought about her empty apartment, her negative bank balance, and the crushing weight of wondering where next month's rent would come from. Yes, she heard herself say.
I'm stay.
By afternoon, Lena's few belongings had been retrieved from her apartment, a task that took only one trip and made her acutely aware of how little she actually owned. The guest room now held her single suitcase, 3 boxes of books, and a wilting houseplant that the guards had carefully transported. Nico had been ecstatic, dragging her through the mansion to show her everything: the library, the game room, the indoor pool, gardens that seemed to stretch forever. But as the tour continued, Lena became increasingly aware of the eyes following them. Guards stood at every corner, watching. Staff members paused in their work, whispering. And the looks they gave her ranged from curious to openly hostile. "That's the training yard," Nico said, pointing through a window to a courtyard where several men practiced what looked like combat drills. "Uncle Marco teaches me there sometimes." Uncle Marco, Scarface, Lena realized. The man who'd brought her here. As if summoned by the mention, Marco appeared in the hallway behind them, accompanied by 2 other men in suits. All 3 stopped when they saw Lena. "Nico," Marco said, his tone careful. "Your father wants you in his office." But Lena and I were. "Now, Nico." The boy's hand tightened around Lena's. "Can she come?"
No.
"This is family business." Marco's eyes fixed on Lena with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Miss Hayes, perhaps you'd like to familiarize yourself with the kitchen? I'm sure Maria could use help with dinner prep." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal. "Go ahead," Lena told Nico gently. "I'll be right here when you're done." Nico left reluctantly, glancing back twice before disappearing around the corner with Marco. The moment he was gone, the temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. The 2 men with Marco moved closer, flanking Lena. One was young, maybe mid-20s, with slicked-back hair and a smirk that set her teeth on edge. The other was older, stocky, with cold eyes that assessed her like she was an item on an inventory list. "So you're the hero," the younger one said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "The waitress who saved the day." "I just helped a lost kid," Lena said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart.
Right.
A lost kid who just happened to be the boss's son. Quite the coincidence. He stepped closer. "Quite the payday too, I hear." "Tony," Marco warned. But Tony ignored him. Funny timing, don't you think? The kid disappears, and suddenly this nobody from nowhere becomes his new best friend. Almost like it was planned. Lena's stomach dropped. "You think I had something to do with his kidnapping?" "I think it's awfully convenient," Tony said. "Girl with money problems, no family, no ties. Perfect plant. You gain the kid's trust, get inside the house, and then what? Feed information to whoever paid you." "That's insane," Lena snapped, anger overriding fear. "I found him crying at the harbor. I took him to the police." "How is that suspicious?" "Because nobody helps for free," the older man said, speaking for the first time. His voice was rough, like gravel. "Not in our world. Everyone wants something." "Well, I'm not from your world," Lena shot back. "Exactly," Tony said. "Which makes you a liability." Marco held up a hand. "That's enough." Mr. DeLuca vetted her. "If the boss trusts her, we trust her." "Do we?" Tony challenged. "Or are we all supposed to ignore basic security protocol because the kid throws a tantrum?" "Watch your mouth," Marco growled, his earlier professionalism replaced by something dangerous. "That's the boss's son you're talking about." "And that's our family she's infiltrating," Tony countered. "Someone set up that kidnapping from the inside, Marco. Someone Nico trusted. We still don't know who. And now we're supposed to just accept this stranger living under our roof." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Lena realized with cold clarity that these men weren't going to welcome her. To them, she was a threat, a variable that didn't fit their careful equations of loyalty and blood. "I'm going to find the kitchen," Lena said quietly, stepping around them. Tony's hand shot out, gripping her arm. "We're not done." "Yes, you are," Marco's voice cracked like a whip. "Touch her again, and you'll answer to Mr. DeLuca. She's under his protection. That means she's untouchable. Capice?" Tony released her arm slowly, his jaw clenched. For now. Lena walked away on shaking legs, feeling their eyes bore into her back. She'd been in the house less than a day and already had enemies. The kitchen turned out to be a massive space of stainless steel and marble, where a woman in her 50s worked with practiced efficiency. She looked up when Lena entered, her expression neutral but not warm. "You must be the new girl," she said in accented English. "I'm Maria, head chef." "Lena." Marco suggested I come see if you needed help. Maria's eyes narrowed slightly. Did he now? She wiped her hands on her apron. "Can you cook?" "Basic stuff. Nothing fancy." Maria turned back to the vegetables she was chopping, her knife moving with intimidating precision. "The boss's son, he likes you." "I guess so." "And the boss, he pays you to be nice to his son." Lena bristled at the implication. "I'm nice to him because he's a scared kid who needs someone." "Is that right?" Maria set down her knife and faced Lena fully. "Let me tell you something, girl. This family, we've been with them for generations. We're loyal. We protect our own. You?" She gestured dismissively. "You're an outsider."
O temporary fix.
"Don't get comfortable." "I don't want to get comfortable," Lena said honestly. "I just want to help Nico." "Everyone wants something," Maria echoed the older guard's words. "In this house, trust is earned in blood and years. You have neither." Before Lena could respond, shouting erupted from somewhere in the house. Nico's voice, high and panicked, screaming her name. Lena bolted from the kitchen, following the sound. She found Nico in the main foyer, tears streaming down his face, fighting against Marco's hold as he tried to calm him. "Lena."
Nico sobbed.
"They said you left. They said you went away." "I'm right here," Lena said, rushing forward. Marco released him, and Nico crashed into her arms. "I'm right here, sweetheart. I didn't go anywhere." Over Nico's head, she saw Matteo descending the stairs, his face a thundercloud. His eyes swept the scene, his hysterical son, Lena holding him, and the assembled staff and guards watching with varying expressions of concern, suspicion, and resentment. "Everyone out," Matteo said quietly. The room emptied in seconds. When only the three of them remained, Matteo knelt beside his son. "Nico, who told you Lena left?" But Nico just buried his face in Lena's shoulder, his small body shaking. Matteo's jaw clenched, and Lena saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Someone had deliberately tried to upset his son. And suddenly, she understood. The threat wasn't just outside these walls. It was already inside. The next morning, Matteo called Lena to his office before sunrise. She left Nico sleeping, Marco stationed outside his door, and found the mafia boss standing by the window, watching dawn break over the ocean. "Close the door," he said without turning. Lena did, her stomach nodding. "Is everything okay?" "No." Matteo turned to face her, and she saw the exhaustion etched into his features. "Someone in this house told my son you'd left. Someone deliberately tried to traumatize him. I figured that much. What you may not have figured is why." He moved to his desk, pulling up security footage on a monitor. "Whoever orchestrated Nico's kidnapping is still here. They're testing weaknesses, gathering information. And now you're the newest variable." Lena watched the screen, which showed various angles of the hallway where Nico had panicked. "You think they're trying to scare me away? Or gauge how much influence you have? How much my son depends on you?" Matteo paused the footage. "Either way, you need to understand something. You're not just a caretaker anymore. You're a piece on a chessboard, whether you want to be or not." The words settled over her like a weight. "So what do I do?" "Stay alert. Trust no one except Marco. He's been with my family since we were children. Everyone else is a potential threat until I identify the traitor." He pulled out a small device, no bigger than a key fob. "Keep this with you. Press the button, and Marco will come immediately, no matter where you are." Lena took it, the plastic cold against her palm. "This is really happening. Someone here wants to hurt a 5-year-old. Someone here wants to hurt me," Matteo corrected, his voice hard. Nico is just the weapon they chose. In this world, family is both your greatest strength and your most vulnerable point. A soft knock interrupted them. Marco entered, his expression grim. We have the information you requested. You're not going to like it. Matteo nodded, then turned to Lena. Today, you and Nico will go into the city. Light errands, lunch at the harbor, somewhere he feels safe. Marco will accompany you with a full security detail. You want us to leave? After what you just said about threats. I want the traitor to make a move, Matteo said coldly. And they're more likely to do it when you're outside these walls. Don't worry, you'll be protected. You're using us as bait, Lena said, anger flaring. I'm drawing out an enemy before they strike on their terms. Matteo met her eyes. I won't let anything happen to my son, Lena. Or to you. But I need to end this, and waiting for the next attack isn't an option. 2 hours later, Lena sat in the back of an SUV with Nico, who chattered excitedly about their outing. Marco drove while another guard occupied the passenger seat, and a second SUV followed close behind. They looked like a presidential motorcade. Can we get ice cream? Nico asked, his earlier trauma seemingly forgotten in the excitement of leaving the estate. Sure, sweetheart, Lena said, though her attention was on the streets sliding past. Every car, every pedestrian, every shadow felt like a potential threat. They parked near the harbor, and the memories of finding Nico here just 3 days ago felt surreal. Had it really been less than a week? Her entire life had transformed in that short span. Marco stayed close as they walked, his hand resting casually near his jacket where Lena knew a gun was holstered. The other guards fanned out, trying to look inconspicuous, but fooling no one. Nico pulled her toward a gelato shop, and for a few minutes, the normalcy of choosing flavors and watching him get chocolate on his nose made Lena almost forget the danger. Almost. Then Marco's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire body tensed. We need to move, he said quietly.
Now.
What's wrong? Lena asked, instinctively pulling Nico closer. Black sedan, 2 blocks back. Same one that's been trailing us since we left. Marco spoke into his wrist mic, eyes on the target vehicle. Gray sedan, license plate Charlie 739er Delta. Prepare for possible intercept. Lena's heart hammered. Should we run?
No. Stay calm.
Act normal. Marco guided them back toward the SUV, his movements measured but purposeful. The moment we panic, they escalate. But Nico sensed the tension. His hand gripped Lena's tighter. Are the bad men back? No, honey, Lena lied, her voice surprisingly steady. We're just heading home a little early. They were 20 feet from the SUV when Lena heard it, the roar of an engine accelerating. She turned and saw the gray sedan racing toward them, mounting the curb. Time slowed. Marco shoved them toward the vehicle while guards moved to intercept. Nico screamed, and Lena's instincts took over. She remembered the route. Not the route they'd taken today, but the route she'd walked with Nico that first morning at the harbor. When she'd been trying to find his family, she'd covered these streets, memorizing landmarks, looking for anyone who might recognize him. The alley, she shouted to Marco, pointing. Behind the fish market, it connects to Market Street. There's a back exit. Marco didn't question her. He grabbed them both and ran, his team converging around them as the sedan screeched to a halt and doors opened. Lena heard shouting, maybe gunfire. She couldn't be sure over Nico's crying and her own thundering pulse. The alley was narrow, stinking of salt and old fish, but it was exactly where she remembered. They burst onto Market Street, where their backup SUV was already racing toward them. Marco practically threw them inside before jumping in after. Go, 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 he barked. The SUV peeled away, tires squealing. Lena held Nico against her chest, his face buried in her shirt, his small body trembling violently. It's okay, she whispered, kissing the top of his head. We're safe. I've got you. Marco was on his phone, speaking rapid Italian. When he hung up, he looked at Lena with something like respect. How did you know that alley? I walked these streets the morning I found Nico. I was trying to find someone who recognized him. Lena's voice shook. I have a good memory for routes. Marco nodded slowly, then spoke into his wrist mic again. The sedan was registered to a shell company connected to the Castellano family. They're confirmed hostiles. Lena didn't know who the Castellanos were, but from Marco's expression, it wasn't good. When they arrived back at the estate, Matteo was waiting at the entrance, his face carved from stone. He pulled Nico into his arms, and for once, his son didn't resist. Did you get them? Matteo asked Marco. 2 of them. They're in the interrogation room. Matteo's smile was cold and terrible. Good. He looked at Lena over Nico's head. You saved him again. Your knowledge of the city may have just revealed who's working with our enemies. Lena didn't understand until later, when Marco explained. The alley route she'd chosen wasn't common knowledge. But the way the sedan had positioned itself suggested they'd expected the group to run in a different direction, the direction any of Matteo's regular guards would have taken. Someone had given the attackers inside information, and Lena's unexpected knowledge had just exposed the flaw in their plan. That night, after Nico finally fell into an exhausted sleep, Marco came to Lena's room. His expression was grave. Mr. DeLuca wants to see you.
Now.
Lena followed him through the quiet mansion, past guards who watched her with new expressions, not hostility anymore, but wariness. She'd proven herself today, but that didn't mean she was trusted. If anything, her quick thinking had made her even more of an anomaly. Matteo's office was filled with smoke from a cigar burning in an ashtray. He stood before a large monitor, reviewing what looked like security footage. Another man, older, with silver hair and glasses, stood beside him, gesturing at the screen. Lena, Matteo said without turning. Come here. I need you to look at something. She approached, and the older man stepped aside. The footage showed various angles of the estate's grounds from 3 days ago, the day Nico had been taken. This is Vincent, Matteo introduced. Head of my security. He's been analyzing the footage from Nico's disappearance. We missed something the first time, Vincent said, his voice clipped and professional. Watch. The footage showed Nico playing near the garden fountain, 2 guards visible in the background. Then a man approached, someone in a suit who looked like he belonged there. The man knelt down, spoke to Nico, and gestured towards something off-screen. Nico hesitated, then followed. We thought it was a stranger who'd breached security, Matteo said, his voice tight. But watch this. Vincent rewound the footage and zoomed in. The man's face was partially visible now, and Lena recognized him, one of the guards she'd seen around the estate. Not Tony or the older stocky one, but someone else. Someone whose name she didn't know. That's Paolo, Marco said from behind her. One of our perimeter guards. Been with the family for 3 years. Now watch what he does, Vincent said, playing the footage forward. The man, Paolo, made a gesture as he spoke to Nico. His hand moved in a specific way, fingers forming what looked like a small, OK sign against his chest before pointing toward the garden's east gate. That's a signal, Matteo said. Common among certain criminal organizations. Means safe passage or trust me. Lena's mind raced back to the incident at the harbor. I've seen that gesture before. Every head turned toward her. When? Matteo demanded. Yesterday. During Nico's tour of the house, Lena closed her eyes, trying to recall the exact moment. We were in the hallway near the training yard. Marco came to get Nico, and there were 2 other men with him, Tony and an older guy.
Sal, Marco Seplaid.
That would be Sal. Tony was accusing me of being a plant, saying I was suspicious. And then Lena opened her eyes. Sal made a gesture when he talked about trust. The same one. His hand, right against his chest, that same signal. The room went deadly silent. Sal's been with us for 12 years, Marco said, his voice hollow. He was at my sister's wedding. He held Nico when he was a baby. Which makes him the perfect inside man, Vincent said grimly. No one would suspect him. No one would question his movements or access. Matteo's face had gone pale, then flushed with rage. He turned away from them, his hands clenched into fists. When he spoke, his voice was barely controlled. Find him.
Now.
And find Paolo. I want them both in the basement within the hour. Marco pulled out his phone, already issuing orders in rapid Italian. Wait, Lena said, something nagging at her. If Sal is the traitor, why would he use that signal in front of me? He didn't know I'd seen it before. Because he's arrogant, Matteo said, turning back. Or because he thought you were too insignificant to matter. A temporary caretaker, an outsider. Why would you know gang signals? Why would you even pay attention? But Lena had paid attention. Growing up in 6 different foster homes across 4 states had taught her to read people, to notice the small details that signaled danger. It was a survival skill she'd never quite shaken. There's more, Vincent said, pulling up another set of footage. After you identified the alley route today, I checked our GPS logs. Sal's phone pinged near that exact location 2 hours before your outing. He was there, likely scouting the area, feeding information to the Castellanos about where you'd be. But how did he know we'd be there? Lena asked. The outing was decided this morning. Staff meeting, Marco said darkly. Matteo announced it at breakfast to the senior guards. Sal was there. Matteo walked to the window, staring out at the dark grounds. 12 years. He ate at my table. He protected my son. And all along, he was planning to use Nico against me. We don't know if it was always the plan, Vincent said carefully. The Castellanos could have turned him recently. Money, blackmail, threats, there are many ways to flip someone. I don't care about his reasons, Matteo said coldly. I care about justice. A phone rang. Marco answered, listened, and his expression darkened. Paolo's gone. His apartment is cleared out. Left sometime this afternoon. He ran after the failed kidnapping attempt, Vincent concluded, which confirms his involvement. And Sal? Matteo asked. Still on the grounds. In the East Barracks, Marco paused. Sir, he doesn't know we suspect him. We can take him quietly. Do it, Matteo ordered. And Marco? I want every person who's had contact with him in the last 3 months investigated. Phone records, bank statements, everything. If there are others, I want them found. As Marco left to execute the orders, Matteo turned to Lena. You should go check on Nico. This isn't something you need to witness. But Lena stood her ground. That man tried to hurt a child. He used Nico's trust against him, traumatized him, locked him in the dark. I deserve to know what happens to him. Something flickered in Matteo's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. What happens to traitors in my world isn't pretty, Lena. I don't need it to be pretty, she said quietly. I need it to be justice. Matteo studied her for a long moment. You're not what I expected. Neither is this life, Lena replied. But here we are. 20 minutes later, Marco returned with Sal in custody. The older guard's face showed confusion first, then dawning horror as he was brought into Matteo's office and saw the security footage playing on loop. Boss, I can explain, he started. Don't, Matteo said, his voice like ice. The time for explanations is over. The time for consequences has begun. Lena watched as Sal's face crumbled, and she felt no pity. Only a cold satisfaction that the man who'd terrorized a 5-year-old was finally caught. Justice, she thought, looked a lot like retribution in this world. And she was surprised to find she didn't mind. The next afternoon, Lena tried to restore some normalcy to Nico's shattered routine. After Sal's arrest, the estate had been on lockdown. Guards doubled. Staff interrogated, tension thick enough to cut. But Nico needed fresh air, needed to feel like a child again instead of a prisoner in his own home. Please, Papa? Nico had begged that morning. Just to the beach. With Lena and Uncle Marco. Please. Matteo had been reluctant, but the psychologist, Dr. Chun, who'd been visiting daily, agreed that Nico needed supervised outdoor experiences to overcome his trauma. Hiding wouldn't heal him. So now Lena walked along the private beach below the estate's cliffs, watching Nico chase seagulls with a freedom she hadn't seen since they met. Marco and 4 other guards maintained a perimeter, but they kept their distance, letting the boy play. He looks happy, Marco observed, standing beside Lena near the water's edge. First time in days, Lena said. The ocean breeze tangled her hair, and she breathed in the salt air, trying to calm her own nerves. Did Sal talk? Marco's expression darkened. Eventually, the Castellanos offered him $500,000 to deliver Nico. He was in debt, gambling problem. They promised to clear it and set him up somewhere new. Was he the only one? Inside the estate, yes. But Paolo was his partner on the outside. They planned it together during a security rotation 3 weeks ago. Marco kicked at the sand. Paolo's already fled the country. We're tracking him, but it'll take time. Lena watched Nico bend down to examine a shell, his small face scrunched in concentration. And the Castellanos? That's complicated. They're a rival family, been in a cold war with us for years. Kidnapping Nico was supposed to force Mr. DeLuca to cede territory in the harbor district. Marco's jaw clenched. They miscalculated. All they've done is guarantee their destruction. The casual way he said it, their destruction, sent a chill through Lena. This was the world she'd entered. Not just danger, but calculated vengeance. Lena, look, Nico called, running toward her with something cupped in his hands.
$100.
Dr. Chen said finding things is good for processing happy memories. Lena smiled, examining his treasure. It's perfect. Should we keep it?
Yes.
For my collection, Nico's eyes shone with simple joy, and for a moment, he was just a normal 5-year-old boy. Then Marco's radio crackled. Sir, we have movement on the cliff road. Single vehicle approaching fast. Black SUV, not one of ours. Marco's hand went to his weapon. Get them to the access stairs.
Now.
But Lena had frozen, her eyes locked on the cliff road above them. She could see the vehicle, and it was the same gray sedan from yesterday, now spray-painted black in a hasty disguise. She recognized the dent in the front bumper. That's them, she said, her voice sharp. The ones from the harbor. I saw that dent when they came at us. Marco barked into his radio. Hostile vehicle confirmed. Lock down the beach access. Get the backup team. The sedan suddenly swerved, crashing through the decorative fencing at the cliff's edge. For a heart-stopping moment, Lena thought it would plunge over, but it skidded to a stop. Doors flew open, and 3 men emerged, already running down the steep path toward the beach. Take Nico. Marco shoved them toward the nearest guard. Get him up the north stairs, back to the house. But Lena's mind was already racing. The north stairs would take 3 minutes to climb, and they'd be exposed the entire way. The men were already halfway down the path, moving with the confidence of people who'd planned this route. Wait, Lena said, grabbing Marco's arm. I know another way. What? When Nico gave me the tour, there's a service tunnel. He showed me, near the boathouse. It leads directly to the estate's basement. She pointed to a weathered wooden structure 50 yards down the beach. The servants used it decades ago, when this was a summer house. Marco stared at her. How do you remember that? I remember routes. I told you Lena picked up Nico, who'd started crying. Trust me. Marco made a split-second decision. Team Alpha, engage hostiles. Buy us time. Team Bravo with me. They ran. Lena's lungs burned as she carried Nico across the sand, his arms locked around her neck. Behind them, she heard shouting, then gunfire. Sharp cracks that made her flinch, but didn't slow her down. The boathouse door was locked. Marco kicked it open without hesitation, and they stumbled into the musty interior. Lena scanned the space, remembering Nico's excited chatter about this secret door. There. She pointed to what looked like a supply cabinet. Behind that, 2 guards shoved the cabinet aside, revealing a narrow wooden door with an old iron handle. Marco pulled it open, and cool air rushed out from a dark tunnel carved into the cliff's rock. Go, go. Marco pushed them inside, 2 guards following while the others stayed to defend the entrance. The tunnel was barely wide enough for an adult, with rough stone walls and a floor slick with moisture. Lena's phone flashlight illuminated maybe 10 feet ahead. She moved as quickly as she dared, one hand on the wall for balance, the other supporting Nico. "You're doing so good, sweetheart," she whispered to him, though her own heart hammered. Almost there. Behind them, more gunfire echoed.
Closer now.
The kidnappers had reached the boathouse. "Faster," Marco urged, his weapon drawn. The tunnel seemed endless, but finally, Lena saw a light ahead. Electric light, not daylight. The basement. They burst through another old door into a storage room filled with wine racks and furniture covered in sheets. Marco immediately radioed their position. "We're in the east basement. Hostiles in pursuit through the service tunnel. Seal it from our end." Guards flooded into the room, creating a defensive wall. Matteo appeared seconds later, his face pale as he took in his son's terrified expression. "Nico," he breathed, and this time when he reached for his son, Nico went to him, both of them holding each other tightly. An explosion of sound erupted from the tunnel, flashbangs, shouting, then silence. Hostiles neutralized, a voice reported over the radio. 2 captured alive, 1 terminated. The tunnel is secure. Matteo looked at Lena over Nico's head, his eyes blazing with intensity. "You knew about the tunnel. Nico showed me during the tour. I didn't think it mattered until—" "You saved him again," Matteo interrupted. "Your memory, your instincts. If you'd gone up the stairs like protocol demanded, they would have caught you. They planned for that. But you found another way." Marco stepped forward. "She's right about something else, boss. Look at the timing."
They knew we were at the beach.
They knew exactly when and where. "Another leak," Matteo said, his voice deadly quiet. "Or," Lena said slowly, a terrible thought forming. "They've been watching us. Actually watching. What if Sal gave them access codes? Security camera passwords?" Matteo's face went rigid. He turned to Vincent, who'd arrived with the guards. "Check every camera, every system. If they've had visual access to this estate, I want to know for how long." As the room erupted into organized chaos, Lena sank onto a covered chair, her legs finally giving out. Nico climbed from his father's arms back to hers, and she held him close, both of them shaking. She'd done it again. Somehow, impossibly, she'd saved Matteo's son. But as she looked at the grim faces around her, she realized the danger was far from over. Vincent's investigation took less than 2 hours. When he returned to Matteo's office, where Lena sat with a sleeping Nico curled in her lap, his expression told the whole story. "They had access to our entire security system for 6 days, Vincent reported, his professional composure barely hiding his fury. "Sal gave them override codes. They watched our routines, our shift changes, everything. The beach trip was announced at breakfast, and they had time to position themselves." Matteo stood perfectly still, his silence more terrifying than any rage. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and cold. "How many people did Sal compromise?" "Just Paolo and himself on the inside. But the Castellanos now know our full security layout, our safe rooms, our protocols." Vincent paused. "Sir, we need to assume they have contingency plans. Today's attack failing won't stop them." "No," Matteo agreed. "But what happens next will." He turned to Marco. "Gather the capos. All of them. I want a full meeting in 1 hour. And bring Sal up from the basement. It's time he served his final purpose." Marco nodded and left. The room felt charged with violent potential. "Lena," Matteo said, his tone shifting slightly. "Take Nico to your room. Lock the door. Don't come out until I come for you, personally." "What are you going to do?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "What should have been done the moment they touched my son?" His eyes were empty of warmth, and Lena saw the man he truly was, not a father or an employer, but a king in a brutal kingdom where mercy was weakness. She stood carefully, cradling Nico. "Mr. DeLuca." "Matteo," he interrupted. "You've earned that right. You've saved my son twice with kindness and twice with courage. You're not just an employee, Lena. You're family now, whether you want to be or not." The word family in this context felt weighted with implications she wasn't ready to examine. She simply nodded and carried Nico toward the door. Lena, Mateo called after her. She turned. Thank you. For everything. For seeing a crying child and choosing compassion when walking away would have been easier. For being exactly who he needed when I couldn't be. There was something raw in his expression, a vulnerability that made him seem less like a mafia boss and more like a broken father trying desperately to protect what he loved most. He's a good kid, Lena said softly. He deserves to feel safe. Yes, Mateo agreed. He does. And after tonight, he will. In her room, Lena laid Nico on her bed and sat beside him, watching him sleep. His face was peaceful now, his small chest rising and falling with steady breaths. She thought about the terrified boy she'd found at the harbor just 5 days ago. Had it really been only 5 days? And marveled at how much had changed. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Dr. Chen. Mr. DeLuca asked me to check in. How is Nico? Lena responded. Sleeping. Scared but unharmed. The reply came quickly. And you? Lena stared at the question. How was she? She'd been shot at, used as bait, had saved a child multiple times, and was now locked in a mansion while a mafia war played out floors below her. I'm okay, she typed, though she wasn't sure it was true. You're remarkably resilient. Nico is lucky to have you. The words should have felt good, but instead they made Lena's chest tight.
Lucky.
As if this was all meant to be, as if stumbling into this world was destiny rather than chaos. Hours passed. Nico woke briefly, ate the food that was delivered to the door by a guard, then fell back asleep. Lena couldn't eat. She paced, checked the locks, and tried not to imagine what was happening in the rest of the house. Finally, near midnight, a soft knock came. Lena, it's Mateo. She unlocked the door. Mateo stood there in a fresh suit, his hair damp as if he'd recently showered. He looked exhausted but satisfied. It's done, he said simply. The Castellanos have agreed to terms. Sal has been dealt with. Paolo will be found. And our security has been completely overhauled. No one will breach this house again. Lena didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know. Nico's safe now, she asked. As safe as I can make him in this world. Mateo stepped into the room, glancing at his sleeping son. Which brings me to what I need to discuss with you. Here it comes, Lena thought. The real offer. The permanent one. I want you to stay, Mateo said. Not temporarily. Permanently. As Nico's caretaker, his guardian when I can't be there. You'd have a salary of $10,000 a month, your own wing of the house, full protection, and autonomy over Nico's care and education. $10,000 a month. Financial security beyond anything she'd dreamed. A home, safety, purpose. Nico trusts you more than anyone except me, Mateo continued. He needs that stability. And selfishly, I need someone in his life who chose to help him without knowing who he was. Someone who sees him as a child first, not as my heir. Lena looked at Nico, then back at Mateo. And what happens when he's older? When he doesn't need me anymore? Then you'll have saved enough to start whatever life you want. I'll provide references, connections, anything you need. Mateo's expression softened. But I think you'll find that Nico will always need you. Children don't forget the people who saved them. It was everything she needed, everything she'd struggled for her entire adult life. And yet, this world, Lena said quietly, it's violent, dangerous. Today proved that. What if next time, I can't save him? What if my luck runs out? Luck. Mateo shook his head. What you've done wasn't luck, Lena. It was instinct, intelligence, and courage. Those don't run out. But the danger doesn't end, she pressed. There will always be another enemy, another threat. Is that really the life I want? The life he deserves? Mateo was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. It's not the life anyone deserves. But it's the life we have. Lena made her decision at dawn. She'd spent the entire night watching Nico sleep, thinking about the little boy at the harbor and the life she'd stumbled into. The money was tempting, more than tempting. It was transformative. But as she watched the sun rise over the ocean through her window, she realized something fundamental. She'd helped Nico because it was right, not because it would lead somewhere. And staying in this world would change that. It would make every kind gesture a transaction, every moment of care a job requirement. Nico deserved better than that.
And so did she.
When Nico woke, she was already packed, her single suitcase by the door, her few belongings ready to go. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice small and frightened. Lena sat on the bed and pulled him close. "Remember when we first met and you were scared at the harbor?" He nodded against her shoulder. "I helped you because you needed help. Not because I knew who you were, not because I wanted anything. Just because it was the right thing to do." She tilted his chin up so she could see his eyes. "And now, the right thing is to let you grow up with your papa, in your home, learning to be brave without me." "But I need you," Nico whispered, tears already forming.
You needed me then.
"But you're stronger now. You talk, you smile, you're not as scared anymore. That's because of you, Nico. You did that." Lena wiped his tears with her thumb. "And your papa loves you so much. He'll keep you safe. I promise." "Will I ever see you again?" "Of course. We'll visit. We'll have ice cream at the harbor. We'll be friends, just not every single day." She hugged him tightly. "But you'll always be my brave boy, who I found by the water. That never changes." The door opened. Mateo stood there, and from his expression, Lena knew he'd already guessed her decision. "Papa," Nico said, turning to his father with tears streaming down his face. "Lena's leaving." Mateo entered slowly and knelt beside the bed. "I know, son," he glanced at Lena. "She told me last night that she needed to think about it." "Can't you make her stay?" Nico asked desperately. "You can make anyone do anything." "No," Mateo said gently, with a sadness that showed his own understanding. "Not her. And not like this." He pulled Nico into his lap. "Lena helped you when you needed it most. But now we need to let her choose her own life. That's what caring about someone really means." Nico cried harder, and Lena's heart shattered. But she knew this was right. Mateo knew it too. She could see it in his eyes. An hour later, one of the SUVs was loaded with her belongings. Mateo had insisted on setting her up in a better apartment, already paid for a full year, in a safer neighborhood. He'd also deposited $50,000 in her account. "I don't want your money," Lena had protested. "It's not a payment. It's a thank you," Mateo had said firmly. "And a promise that you'll never struggle the way you were struggling before. You gave my son back his childhood. That's worth more than any amount." She'd finally accepted, understanding it would insult him to refuse. Now, standing by the car with Nico clutching her hand, Lena felt the weight of goodbye settling over her. "I arranged for you to work at the Harborview Cafe," Mateo said quietly, standing a respectful distance away. "The new ownership was convinced to offer you a management position. Better pay, better hours. Or, if you prefer something else, I have other options." "The cafe is perfect," Lena said. Full circle, she thought. Back to where it started. "You'll have protection. You won't see them, but they'll be there. The Castellanos are handled, but I don't take chances with people who matter to my family. Thank you." Mateo nodded, then crouched beside his son. "Nico, let Lena go now. We'll see her soon. Promise?" Nico asked, looking between them. "Promise," Lena said, and meant it. Nico released her hand slowly, then suddenly lunged forward for one last hug. Lena held him tight, memorizing the feel of his small arms around her, the smell of his strawberry shampoo, the sound of his breathing. "Be brave," she whispered. "Be kind. And remember, you're stronger than you think." "I'll remember," Nico said into her shoulder. When he finally let go, Mateo walked Lena to the car. Marco was driving, a small comfort. "You could have had everything," Mateo said quietly, so only she could hear. "I have everything I need," Lena replied. a job, a home, and the knowledge that I made a difference. You made more than a difference. Mateo's expression was unreadable. You reminded me what matters. In this life, I've forgotten sometimes that there are people who do good without expecting returns. You're rare, Lena Hayes. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away from a crying kid. No, Mateo said. You're someone who chose compassion when the cost was high. That's not just someone. That's remarkable. He extended his hand. Lena shook it, feeling the strength in his grip and the sincerity in his eyes. If you ever need anything at all, you call Marco. No questions asked. You're family now, whether you live here or not. Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. She got in the car. As Marco drove away, she looked back once and saw Mateo holding Nico, both of them waving. Nico's face was tear-streaked, but he was smiling, a real smile, not weighted with fear. That image stayed with her as they descended from the cliffs and returned to the city. 3 weeks later, Lena stood behind the counter at the Harborview Cafe, watching the morning rush with practiced efficiency. The job was everything Mateo had promised: better pay, flexible hours, and a manager title that came with respect from her coworkers. The harbor looked the same as it had that fateful morning. Tourists took photos, fishermen hauled their catches, seagulls circled overhead. The door chimed, and Lena looked up from the espresso machine. Nico ran in, dragging Mateo by the hand, his face lit with pure joy. Lena, we came for ice cream. You promised. Lena laughed, coming around the counter to hug him. I did promise, didn't I? Mateo stood back, watching them with an expression that was part contentment, part melancholy. He looked less burdened than before, and Nico looked lighter too, healing slowly but surely. We can't stay long, Mateo said. But Nico insisted we visit. I'm glad you did, Lena said, meaning it. As she made them drinks and listened to Nico chatter about his new tutor and the puppy Mateo had finally agreed to get him, Lena realized something profound. She'd been terrified that leaving would mean losing them entirely. But this, casual visits, genuine friendship, the freedom to care without obligation was better than any permanent arrangement could have been. She'd found Nico at the harbor when he was lost. And in saving him, she'd somehow saved herself too. Not with money or status or security, but with the simple truth that sometimes the most important thing you can do is choose kindness when no one's watching. The Mafia heir and the waitress had changed each other's lives in ways neither expected. And that, Lena thought as she watched them leave with promises to return next week, was worth more than any fortune. She'd made the right choice. She'd chosen compassion. And in the end, that choice had given her everything that truly mattered.
The end.